Oh, the irony. I'm recording a Bailu-themed video while I'm recovering from being sick. Anyway, I'm on the last leg of the sickness, so I might as well pull up my script and start recording. In the earlier... Fuck. In the earlier days of Genshin, Electro-Charged, or EC for short, was a reaction that was extremely popular because of how efficient it was for damage, AoE coverage, and free-to-play team building. Its biggest buff was the introduction of Lunar-Charged, though this buff was more for the EC teams, not the reaction itself, because Lunar-Charged was considered a separate reaction altogether. While the Lunar stuff addressed some of the issues in a few reactions, I'd still like to give some love to the base reactions. And so, this episode of Trailblazer to Traveler will turn Bailu into a dedicated Electro-Charged and workable Lunar-Charged support. As always, additional info can be found down below, and captions are available if you need them. Without further ado, let's get started. Choosing Bailu to be our EC unit was a pretty simple choice. She's a character with a lot of water themes, but is also a lightning character in HSR, so I chose to make her a hydro character with electro synergy. She's gonna be a catalyst user because her little bottle looks like it would be a perfect catalyst design, though I might have to put up with the "ugh, another hydro catalyst" complaints with this design choice. For her Ascension stat, I'm choosing to give her a 22.1% healing bonus. This will be relevant in how you want her to be played, because healing and overhealing will be a big part of her kit. This actually isn't the first time I made an Electro-Charged character kit design. For those who somehow don't know about my BL obsession, I created Genshin Doomed Yaoi with a duo named Arashi and Kaito. One was an EC DPS, which aged pretty well with Flins' release. The other was an EC buffer and support, which was kind of shown with units like Ineffa or Ineffa. Bailu's not going to do anything special to the reaction itself aside from damage buffing, but how that buff activates is what I want to explore with the kit. In her case, it's how I'm going to connect HP and healing with the EC reaction. Bailu's skill is going to be a basic healing ability with some off-field damage. She deals AoE Hydro damage every 1 second, and this applies Hydro every other hit for a clean 2-second ICD. For a lot of the testing I did on screen, I used Columbina as the replacement Hydro unit to showcase application. Upon casting, she'll heal 3 times. The first instance will always heal the party member with the lowest HP. The next 2 instances will be completely random, and their healing instances are going to be 15% less than the previous instance. So if Bailu heals the first ally for 10,000, the second ally gets healed by 8,500, and the third ally gets healed for 7,225. Unless there's no other option to heal, no ally will be healed twice within the same use of Bailu's skill. In other words, the only way you can heal someone twice is if you only have 2 members alive, which is highly unlikely. This part at least removes some of the RNG aspects, so that you're not just healing the same 1 or 2 units every time you cast your skill. As a final detail, Bailu generates 4 particles upon hitting an enemy with her skill. For Bailu's burst, she grants the entire party Invigoration. If a party member triggers Electro-Charged, they will be healed. Alternatively, when Thunderclouds deal Lunar-Charged damage, all contributing party members will be healed. This can occur once every 1 second per party member. Moreover, each party member now deals increased Electro-Charged and Lunar-Charged damage based on their own max HP. This is going to be an additive bonus to the reaction, similar to Llama's Quill buff. Fortunately for Bailu, there's no stat capping for her. Lunar-Charged, however, is going to have a much smaller scaling than Electro-Charged, and I mean much smaller. While you can still run Bailu in a Lunar team, she won't provide that much in terms of buffing. The way the scaling works also makes team HP buffs much more valuable, since it scales on each character's own HP. For teams, double Hydro is a viable option, since that creates an innate 25% HP bonus. It also creates an artifact-friendly effect. While you wouldn't want to run your attack or EM scalers on HP builds, getting those unlucky HP substats now has a purpose in Bailu teams. It's not ideal, but not completely useless either. For the burst cost, I'd usually follow the conversion chart I made based on HSR energy cost, which would make Bailu's 100 cost turn into a 40 cost in Genshin, but that's a really cheap energy cost, especially in an Electro-Charged team which likely has more particles flying around, so I'm gonna give her a 70 cost burst. This also means energy recharge might have to be considered for her builds, so you can't just build all HP on her. For Bailu's A1 passive, I'm gonna bring in more direct reaction damage stuff because that's a mechanic I'm not afraid to milk. If Bailu overheals an ally, she deals an instance of AoE electro damage, which is considered as Electro-Charged damage. The base damage scales on her max HP. This damage cannot be converted into Lunar-Charged damage, it can only trigger once every 0.3 seconds, and it's unable to trigger the healing effect from Bailu's burst. This passive is meant to be more of a damage-dealing ability, kind of like an EC version of Ineffa. The damage has double HP scaling, one for her base damage and another on her burst's bonus damage. I added this ability more for kit experimentation. I wanted to explore a Columbina mechanic, where a character deals direct reaction damage of a different element. It also allows Bailu to contribute her own form of EC damage, since her EC ownership might not be as high compared to other characters. To maximize the ability, you want fast EC triggers. Doing this allows Bailu to heal more often, since it's directly tied to the frequency of EC triggers. If that healing overheals, she's able to deal her direct EC damage. With that being said, I want Bailu's main role to be a team reaction buffer, so while I describe the ability to be Ineffa-like, the numbers are nowhere near as high. Mechanically, this ability synergizes pretty well against the Electro-Charged related bosses. All of these enemies require you to damage a special bar, which are especially weak to Electro or Lunar-Charged. Since Bailu can deal direct Electro-Charged damage, it either fills the special bars faster, or deals higher damage to destroy the special shield faster, both of which will break the enemy out of its special state sooner so you can get back to dishing out the rest of your damage. For the A4 passive, when enemies take Electro-Charged or Lunar-Charged damage from regular reaction sources, which is basically non-direct damage, Bailu gains a stack of Rain Saunter. Each stack of Rain Saunter increases the party's max HP based on 3% of Bailu's healing bonus. A max of 20 stacks can be obtained and can be gained once every 0.3 seconds. Each stack lasts for 20 seconds and durations are counted independently. This passive is going to double down on Bailu's buffing as it makes her healing bonus provide a secondary effect. At max stacks, the scaling is 60% of her healing bonus. And because the team-wide Electro and Lunar-Charged bonus scales on each party member's own max HP, the HP bonus actively helps all characters utilize this buff. As for HP scalers like Yelan or Furina, this buff helps both their Electro-Charged and personal damage. A kit like this would also be one of the first HP buffers in the game, because the only one who does this is Shilonen, but the HP buff is locked behind C2 and it only buffs Hydro characters. As a quick overview of the entire kit, Bailu works as a strong healer, Electro-Charged buffer, and direct Electro-Charged sub-DPS. Her entire kit design focuses on a strength of Electro-Charged that Lunar-Charged doesn't have, which is tick rate. The thundercloud that deals Lunar-Charged damage is locked behind a 2-second interval rate. You can use Columbina to have a 33% chance at creating a second instance, but there's currently no way to speed up the intervals. Lunar-Charged will also strike every enemy at the exact same time. Things like Bailu's A4 passive wouldn't grant multiple stacks due to its 0.3 second cooldown. So with a slow hit rate, there's no way for it to get anywhere near max stacks. For Electro-Charged, there's a 1-second interval, but with quick application, triggering the reaction deals an instant hit of Electro-Charged damage. As such, you can bypass this 1-second interval and make it deal damage a bit more often. Even more, in AoE content, it's possible for enemies to take Electro-Charged damage at separate intervals. This means it can take advantage of the 0.3 second cooldown, so reaching 20 stacks is extremely easy to achieve. You can also hit the limit sooner in a rotation, so maintaining the stacks is also doable. This idea also ties into Bailu's A1 passive. In Lunar-Charged, she heals all party members at the same time, With a 0.3 second cooldown, she can't trigger multiple hits of her direct damage, effectively restricting her to the 2-second intervals that it deals. In Electro-Charged, since party members can trigger the reaction quicker and in staggered forms, this allows Bailu to deal her direct EC damage way more frequently. These aspects, combined with the lower damage bonus I gave Lunar-Charged, make it so that Bailu doesn't overbuff the Lunar-Charged teams. And this was something I wanted to design around. The introduction of Lunar-Charged reactions was a good way to raise up older team archetypes. So they modified or upgraded certain characters to synergize with the new reaction. With Bailu, I worked backwards with her design. I wanted her to still have workable synergies with Lunar-Charged, just to be consistent with other units. But I chose to hone in on some of the mechanical differences between the two in order to make the Electro-Charged reaction the better synergy. Speaking of synergies, let's cover teams. As someone with HP buffing, she works a little better with other HP scaling units. Furina is one of the better choices because she requires a good healer to max out fanfare. Bailu has that in spades, but there's a tiny possible downside to this. Having HP draining means less healing goes into overhealing. This leads to the possibility that Bailu deals less direct EC damage, so you have to be mindful of that trade-off with their synergies in that regard. Yelan and Neuvillette are HP scalers, which means they can dual benefit from the HP buffs. Kuki and Dori are also Electro units with HP scaling, but Kuki's application is pretty slow at 3 seconds, and Dori has that weird inconsistency with her Electro application, because enemies have to be crossing that, wire looking thing. But as an interesting off synergy, Beidou at C1 gets a slight benefit from the HP buff. The shield she makes with this constellation is an HP scaling shield. While it's not the tankiest option, it can make her a good choice for defensive utility. It's also worth noting that Beidou is one of the OGs when it comes to Electro-Charged teams. For attack and EM scaling units, they benefit a bit less from the HP scaling effect, but it kinda balances out in the sense that these units tend to trigger the reaction more frequently. For example, Fischl, Sucrose, and Xingqiu are all very fast appliers for their element, so the numbers would hopefully balance out in the end. If you run an Animo unit to swirl Hydro, this can help maintain Hydro auras on enemies. At the same time, Bailu's skill being AoE means she's not as reliant on swirl, since her hits can multi-apply to targets. If you are going to use an Animo driver, Ineffa can be a decent secondary EC buffer if you really want to invest in reaction damage. His kit and Bailu's are very similar, so they'd probably overlap on a lot of aspects. Mizuki and Lanyan can both serve as Animo drivers, and their EM scaling or EM friendly kits are good for higher personal swirl and EC damage. Both also have some form of sustain as well, which once again oversaturates that utility. Of course, you have Sucrose, who drives Animo and provides team-wide EM. All Animo units can run VV for the res shred, which is good since Bailu herself doesn't actually give that. Of course, you don't have to focus on Electro-Charged being the main source of damage, especially if you're pairing Bailu with Furina for that personal damage buff. Clorand and Veressa are a few examples of DPS units who don't specialize as EC units, but can still fit in the relevant teams. If you decide to go for teams with personal damage investment, Eon-san, Oraron, and Shilonen are all great Cinder City holders. While Eon-san and C6 Oraron provide some damage bonuses, Shilonen in particular can be an alternate res shred unit. It's also fine running Bailu in a few teams where EC isn't the only reaction. Overvape is a popular archetype that uses the EC aura with Pyro to enable Overload and Vaporize at once. So you could run Durin for that res shred or vaporize damage, then for pure damage, Xiangling or Arlecchino are a couple of the better options. On another end, Dendro can be a good choice, but when you add more Dendro application, the rate and uptime of EC drops. Based on some test dummy runs I did, the best way to run Bailu in a Dendro team is to play the team as double Hydro or double Electro. Double Electro allows the Hydro unit to still react with a coexisting Electro and Quicken aura, so EC can still occur occasionally alongside Bloom. Meanwhile, double Hydro washes away Dendro much quicker, so that allows for more EC uptime. On that note, Nahida has a strong Dendro aura, so it's recommended to run the double Hydro comp if you choose her in particular. Lunar-Charged is still an option, but the buffs Bailu provides are much smaller. Even Columbina, who's an HP scaler, doesn't get that high of a bonus with Bailu's buff. With these extra archetypes in mind, Bailu's someone who still functions in a variety of teams, but the fact remains that she's still an Electro-Charged focus unit. Not only that, but she's a dedicated reaction buffer. This means that teams who focus specifically on the reaction will use Bailu's kit much better, and that's basically just a standard taser team. The more you lean into hyper carry teams that simply use Electro-Charged, Bailu loses some of her team buffing utility, and her role becomes more of a healer and reaction DPS. Okay, as usual, let's do a really quick summary on artifacts, weapons, and the custom signature weapon. Artifact main stats are either HP or ER on the Sands, HP on the Goblet, and either HP or healing bonus on the Circlet. I think healing bonus is a bit better for the Circlet because it provides the team-wide HP bonus, which means team-wide EC buffs. It also allows Bailu to heal more often and trigger her direct EC hits. Substats for artifacts are HP first, then EM for extra EC damage, and then ER if you need it. Best sets: Tenacity if you're running an attack scaling team. Her skill damage is weak, but consistent to trigger the effect. If you're running more of a non-attack scaling team, you could consider one of the two healing sets. For Ocean Hued Clam, the more you trigger EC, the more you heal, and the more damage you deal when the bubble pops. For Song of Days Past, it's a bit better if her healing's a bit slower and you're only able to hit the 15,000 threshold. Gilded is a decent personal damage option since her direct EC damage follows a similar formula to lunar damage. It scales on her HP, but is also buffed by the EM reaction formula. And if you want to get really niche, Thundering Fury provides an unconditional 40% bonus to EC damage, which can also be an okay damage alternative. Onto weapons. While Bailu can use certain EM weapons, HP is her go-to stat. First, Thrilling Tales. A classic, and to this day, a really strong choice when buffing attack units. Prototype Amber has massive overkill on the healing, but it has an HP substat and can be good for energy regen. Wave Riding Whirl is a strong ER and HP stat booster, especially if Bailu is run in a double Hydro team. For 5-star weapons, I actually do prefer the EM choices over the HP ones. Jadefall Splendor and Everlasting Moonglow both have the HP stats, but since Bailu can't make a shield, Jadefall's passive has low uptime. Meanwhile, Moonglow would only be effective if you run her as a main DPS. On that note, the EM weapons are also just stat 6 at best. But now, let's talk about the signature weapon. A few of my T2T variants ended up with the signature weapon being completely original and not based on the signature light cone, but Bailu's is surprisingly similar. Cloud Him Reborn has a 542 base attack and a 66.2% HP bonus. There's also a 10% healing bonus granted by default. For its passive, when the user heals or overheals an ally other than themselves, they grant Ichor to that ally. The Ichor effect will store that instance of healing for 5 seconds, converting 3.6% into an Elemental Mastery bonus. Each healing instance has an independent duration, and each ally has their own Ichor. The user themselves cannot get the Ichor effect. Instead, if they heal themselves, they get an EM bonus scaling off 0.6% of their max HP. This weapon is a powerful team-wide EM booster, and is thematically a pretty neat representation of the ebb and flow that water has. When you heal an ally, you convert some of that healing into EM, but because the healing instances have independent durations, the bonus will fluctuate. You'll have some peaks and valleys depending on how frequently and consistently you heal an ally. In Bailu's case, her skill provides a lot of healing, but it's a one-time use ability, so uptime is pretty short. Her burst is the consistent source of healing, but she can only heal party members if they're actively triggering Electro or Lunar-Charged. This nudges her to play in teams where all party members consistently trigger the reaction. If you run units who can't trigger EC, they can't get healed or gain Ichor, so Bailu can't buff those Vaporize or Bloom teams. It's also stronger on teammates with faster EC triggers. For example, slower triggers like Kuki would be healed less, so they get a lower EM average. For other potential users, Kokomi and Barbara when played on-field can heal the entire party through their autos. This can provide strong EM for all Hydro-related reactions. Baiju's consistent healing on his burst is single target, but it can still be useful to buff the on-fielder if they make use of reactions like Quicken or Bloom. The reason I made it so that the user gets a separate EM bonus scaling is because of a few issues involving Ineffa, Mizuki, and Neuvillette. Ineffa and Mizuki are EM scaling healers. If they can grant themselves the EM buff, this increases the healing output they do, which would exponentially boost their EM bonus. To avoid issues like this, there is a mechanic that prevents stat conversions from being used in other stat conversions, but I'm not sure if or how healing fits in that mechanic, since it's technically not a stat. Then for Neuvillette, he can heal himself for 48% of his max HP every use of his special charge attack. If he has around 40,000 HP, that converts to a 19,000 healing value, which further converts to a 700 EM bonus. So by making the user's EM bonus use a flat scaling, it prevents abusing the passive on some characters, but it still allows Bailu to get a solid EM stat for her own EC damage. Alright, that's gonna do it for this episode. As much as I like how Lunar-Charged buffed the older teams, I haven't forgotten about our base reaction system. I think there's a lot of untapped potential for reactions to be explored in unique ways. Using the high-frequency triggers of Electro-Charged was my way of exploiting the reaction for Bailu's kit. She's a bit more niche in terms of what she brings to the table, but this was still a fun thought experiment nonetheless. If you enjoyed my video, consider leaving a like and subscribe to support the channel. Let me know in the comments what you liked about the kit, what you would change, and any alternative ideas you might have. If you want to share more of your original concepts with our community, consider joining my Discord server. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye!